And now it's time for Ag on 8, where we share a deeper dive into ag news impacting you. Well, first, the latest USDA trade report has some hiccups. The May outlook for U.S. agricultural trade was released late. That report dated on May 29th, but it was actually released the following Monday. The outlook also typically has a written analysis, but this time that text isn't there. Overall, the analysis expects a bigger trade deficit than what was thought back in February. That number is now at $49.5 billion. Well, the latest U.S. drought report shows a majority of Iowa, nearly 72%, is at least abnormally dry. In Illinois, about half the counties are feeling some sort of dryness. Now, in the last week, following some big storms, I spoke with a Milan farmer about his crop conditions and learned what an agriculture weather expert predicts for the rest of the season.
3 weeks ago, this was dust.
Rod Dare farms about 300 acres in Rock Island County.
Devastating dust? No, but it was dust.
Those concerns are less of a worry now.
We were very fortunate.
That's after storms and 4 inches of rain on Tuesday caused devastation right down the road.
We were extremely dry, and the concern of drought was definitely on most of our minds, I think.
Eric Snodgrass, an atmospheric scientist for Nutrien, believes that farmers aren't quite out of the storm.
Going into the spring, we had a 60% chance that the areas you're talking about were going to have summer drought episodes. Now that's down about 45%.
Every year, Snodgrass knows there's about a 30% chance of drought.
Still lingering underneath, the surface layers there. There's some fall droughts still hanging out in the lack of soil moisture deep down.
He believes that the newest data isn't the kindest to the center of the Corn Belt.
They continue to put out drier risks. And we don't know yet if the models are telling us a fib or if they're really finding a signal that is worth monitoring.
Well, as farmers think about the rest of their growing season, Snodgrass says the next 3 weeks are really critical to the health of the crop. He says there's a few things that he's looking out for.
If a ridge of high pressure sits over Minnesota, we're in trouble. And if it stays there, we're in trouble.
But a ridge of high pressure between Montana, Oregon, and Idaho would be a good sign for farmers.
We got to plant a seed in the soil and hope, right?
It's a hope every year for farmers like Dare.
I think the potential is here for a really, really good crop. But the potential seems like it's always here, and then wait and see what happens.
It's a game of waiting whether crops stand in dirt or in dust. Well, a young man from Illinois is stealing the bacon. He's a top winner at the World Pork Expo. Drew Mickey putting his knowledge to the test, placing second in the Young Pork Advocates Issues meeting. The expo was just this past week, and it took place in Des Moines, Iowa. Now, it's an event more than 10,000 pork producers go to, with about 400 companies showing off the industry's newest technologies. Well, Drew joins us now, sharing what the World Pork Expo is about and what he's advocating for. How are you, Drew?
Good. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes. Well, thanks for joining us. I first want to get a little bit of background from you. We were just talking and you said you're from Taylorville. I mean, did you grow up on a hog operation?
Yeah, so I come from a fifth generation family farm, mainly corn and soybean operation. But over the past decade or so, I've had experience with purebred swine as well as Angus cattle.
Well, very good. Well, tell us a little bit more about the World Pork Expo. I mean, did you go growing up? What motivated you to want to go this year?
Yeah, so this was actually my first World Pork Expo. And so I guess the thing that motivated me to go was really my internship related to the Illinois Pork Producers Association and all the opportunities to connect with industry leaders, whether that be in nutrition or pharmaceuticals. There's so many different aspects of the pork industry to get involved with. So growing up in purebred swine side of things, I had a little bit of experience and was familiar with the World Pork Expo, but going out and being able to experience that for the first time was really an incredible experience.
I'm sure it sounds like a really busy time with lots of people, lots going on. And one of those big things that does happen at this is this competition that you place second in. Tell us more about this competition and maybe the rigor that comes along with it.
Yeah, so this was the second year for the Young Pork Advocates contest. And so it's basically a discussion meet, essentially, is what we're doing. And we're debating different topics within the pork industry. So this year we had 3 different rounds that had 3 different topics that covered. The first one was regulations facing the pork industry, like Proposition 12 and Question 3. Our next topic was the labor shortage in the pork industry. And then the final one was related to pork exports. So 3 different topics that we discussed basically among groups of 5. and is basically around a discussion as well as an opening statement and closing statement.
So tell me, I mean, was there one of these categories that you did better in? What was one of your favorite ones to talk about?
I would say that I really enjoyed discussing all of them. I'd say the category or the topic that I learned the most from was probably the pork exports discussion. It wasn't necessarily an area that I was very familiar with before the contest, and so being able to gain more knowledge in terms of the pork export market, and then additionally from there, I also really enjoyed talking about the labor shortage and seeing how we could work to advance that, as well as Proposition 12 and Question 3. I really enjoyed a lot of them. I'd say my favorite was probably discussing Prop 12 and Q3 because it's something that we've been battling in the pork industry for a long time. And so being able to see how we could potentially find solutions to that was really interesting to me.
Well, that's a great question I have there. I mean, Proposition 12 has been passed and kind of implemented for over a year now. Tell me more. I mean, are farmers in this area, livestock owners, are they facing difficulties because of that?
Yeah, so through the Illinois pork producers, I've been able to go on a couple different farm visits, and there are some that are facing that. There's a lot of people facing that because when you think about a lot of our packers and processing plants, a lot of the major ones have to go to open pen gestation. A lot of them have to become Prop 12 compliant because in order to sell to California and all those and be compliant with Prop 12. Those packing plants have to be all across the nation have to be compliant with that, and so a lot of producers are moving to start to become Prop 12 compliant if they are not already. Um, Even though we're 1,700 miles away from California, we still have to follow those regulations, just because it's kind of the nature of the game that we're dealing with right now in the pork industry, and so it can affect any state, and that's the issue that the National Pork Producers Council is trying to deal with, is because we are having to deal with it even though we don't live in California.
And so tell me, you said another issue that you were passionate about speaking about this past week was pork exports. We've had some people talk about cattle exports recently, but what's going on in the world of pork there?
Yeah, the big thing that we kind of discussed, the discussion was mainly related to how producers can help with pork exports. And so the big thing was we talked about a lot of emerging economies. And so there's obviously a lot of tariff and non-tariff trade barriers that are going on in the pork industry. But really, when it comes right down to it, there's always changing things happening with different administrations, and so as a pork industry we can't necessarily control that. We have to control what we can do as producers, and what we can do is we can work on our product development, and we can continue to advocate for our product and engage consumers across the globe. The National Pork Board just started a new campaign just a month ago called Taste What Pork Can Do. And so that's kind of a domestic campaign, but I kind of brought up in the discussion how that could potentially turn into something that could be used on the international level. So there's obviously countries like Vietnam and the Philippines is really what a lot of pork export people are looking at, is because those are some of the emerging economies that were discussed during the discussion meet. And so those are really important economies to look at, because if we could work with them and try to work around some current barriers that exist, they could be very impactful to the pork industry.
And to make sure we hit all three of the things you talked about, tell us about the labor shortage and what's going on there.
Yeah, so the labor shortage is very unique, and there are a lot of different ways that individuals went about discussing that in our issues meet. And so I guess some of the big things were obviously a lot of focus was on visa workers, and so there's multiple programs for pork producers when it comes to TN or H-2A visas. There's been discussion around having the H-2A visas become year round. And so right now they're just seasonal agriculture workers. And so that was one thing that was brought up in discussion. I focused a little bit more on the retention of these workers and trying to give them the resources necessary to succeed once they arrive here in the United States, so they can be successful with their producers, because producers have a lot of challenges once these visa workers arrive, because they have to provide housing, transportation, and a lot of different aspects. And so it's very important that the employee as well as the producer feel comfortable in their relationship with each other, and that they have the tools to succeed.
Well, why do you believe that this is a contest that the National Pork Council is investing in right now?
I would say an important contest and it's an important event at the World Pork Expo, really because it's developing the future of the industry. I think that seeing more youth at the World Pork Expo is something that's very valuable. And so I think that the National Pork Producers Council is placing a special emphasis on that, as well as placing a special emphasis on networking with college-age students at World Pork Expo. And so I think that being able to get more people involved in these issues and bring more people into the discussion is always very valuable. And that's what the National Pork Producers Council is working to do right now. And so I think they had more participants in the contest than last year. So it's certainly on the right track to continue to advance the youth of the pork industry.
Well, it sounds like they've got some really great, well-spoken spokespeople like you. So thanks again, Drew, for taking some time to talk about your experience there, and congratulations on your big award.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate it.
A bill awaiting Governor J.B. Pritzker's signature has been called the Chicken Bill. If signed, it will lift long-standing restrictions on Illinois' small poultry farmers. Farmers who process fewer than 7,500 birds a year would be exempt from state and federal inspections of their poultry operations. The current threshold is 5,000 birds. The change could allow these farmers to sell their poultry beyond their own farms and expand to farmers markets, roadside stands, and delivery operations. Well, another bill also sits on Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's desk, and this one's about licenses for pesticide application. It's why Kevin Johnson with the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association joined us earlier this week, talking about what it will mean for farmers and public safety. How are you today, Kevin?
Great. How you doing, Holly?
Good, good. Well, this bill makes some changes. Can you tell us exactly what we're changing here?
Yep. So right now, currently in Illinois, all applicators must take a test to keep up their license exam through the Illinois Department of Agriculture. You do that every 3 years. And around other states, like in Iowa, Indiana, Missouri, after you take that test, you can do continuous education credits to keep up your exam rather than taking that test every year. What SB 783 does is lets you guys have an option to do continuous educations into the future. If you still like taking the test every 3 years, great. But we think when this is all done and said, that most guys will take continuous education credits into the future. And we think this is a great thing because this will get more of that information directly to his applicators of what the new labels are. But like issues of herbicide strategy, Endangered Species Act, we can get that to the applicators. There are 36,000 applicators in the state of Illinois, so this is going to be a great option. But again, we've always heard from members, but all private applicators as farmer applicators, to give them more options to keep up their pesticide exam.
Well, you said there's quite a few applicators, and quite a few of those are farmers, aren't they? I mean, how many farmers
Yeah,
specifically are applicators?
yeah, absolutely. Out of those 36,000, about 11,000 are just what they call private applicators, but that are farmer applicators in the state of Illinois. I am one in the state of Illinois, my brother. So this is going to give us more options. And why we push this is we had members that push it, but I also know I learn differently than somebody else learns differently. So if you can take a test better, great. But if you want to see visual stuff and be able to go through those in your winter time, you're going to be able to do that.
And you mentioned the Endangered Species Act. You mentioned a couple things there. I mean, what are some of those specific things that these continuing education opportunities could be about?
Yeah, this is the best thing about this. With the Department of Ag, we're going to help them, but they're also going to lean on industry to say, we might do a couple hours of general standards, what we just got hit every year, but what are the issues of the day that we need to hit? Right now, I think Endangered Species Act and the herbicide strategy would definitely be one of them. But in 5 years, if that's a whole nother issue that we're not talking about right now, we can change that up. So it's going to be more current time, not just the same classes every year.
Yeah, so some flexibility there. Obviously, you know what's going
Absolutely.
on with the time, it sounds like. Another thing, I mean, in these cases, you're applying chemicals to fields. I mean, how could this bill
Absolutely.
be really helpful in the future for just public safety, for, you know, those in the general public?
Yep. So one of the best things, if you looked at the vote count on this, it was 50-4 in the Senate and 116-0 in the House. There's some guys that are not very pesticide friendly in Illinois, but we told them this is how we can bring this better education and explain what we need. And I think this is going to help us down in Springfield to explain where pesticides are happening at. Better education at the end of the day will help drive us less or legislation down in Springfield.
And when does this start if it's signed into law?
Yeah. So I would love to tell you that it's going to be immediately, but we think the governor is going to sign SB 783. That would probably take effect starting January of 26. We still got to build the program out. We think this is going to hit is middle of 27 at the end of the day, just to build this. The Department of Ag has to build a new computer system for this or new software. And we're going to have to build the classes out. So I'd love to say, hey, this fall we're going to do it. That's probably more of a shot that it's going to be more summer or fall of 27 when you're going to start taking continuous education classes.
And I know you mentioned that this was something that you were on the offense about. I mean, what did it feel like to be able to be part of something on that side of it in Springfield?
Especially in Illinois, agriculture is not always on offense, but I think this is a time where we could be on offense and show that we can bring something better to agriculture and bring something of value to them. Because we're not always on offense. And this is a great lesson to show that we can get something passed in Illinois offensively in agriculture, but just expanding the knowledge of all applicators.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Kevin.
Thanks a lot, Haley.